The other practice to train your attention, which probably not a lot of people focus on, but I really do, is the non-formal practice or the informal practice of mindfulness, where you actually train your mind to be more present in the things that you are doing every single day. So think about it. Think about all those things that you do in default mode: commuting, driving, listening, walking, showering, all those things that we do, but we're there, but we're not there. We're thinking about the next place. We get to our destination, we don't even know how we got there. We didn't notice the things along the way. So all of these are opportunities to train yourself, to train your attention.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Best You interview series. It's Gary here again. Thank you very, very much, as always, for taking the time to join me. And today I'm delighted to be joined by high performance coach, author, keynote and TEDx speaker, Melo Calarco, who is here to discuss the power of mindfulness and attention in relationship building. Melo truly believes that everybody can live a life of full passion and potential without burning out. And he is on a mission to empower as many people as possible to achieve this through his programs, workshops, and one-on-one coaching. Melo's results-based work is grounded in neuroscience, mindfulness, human behavior, and other unique tools to help his clients find self-awareness, clarity, focus, and ultimately success. Melo learned to manage highly challenging and stressful situations, build mental endurance, and rise above adversity from his life lessons on the road, where he cycled, trekked, and travelled around the world, literally around the world on his mountain bike. He traversed Africa, Asia, India, Nepal, Europe, and North America. Along the way, he had to overcome many, many obstacles and demanding encounters, including near-death experiences. Melo is the author of Beating Burnout, Finding Balance, Mindful Lessons for a Meaningful Life. And we will definitely get a chance to chat about that today. Melo, thank you very, very much for taking the time to join me.
Thank you. Nice to be here today. I've got my cup of tea, 7:30 in the morning here in Melbourne, Australia. So good morning to you.
I love it. The very first thing prior to recording that Melo said was good morning, and I just have one of those fractional brain breaks where I'm thinking it's the afternoon here. I love it. The power of technology to bring us together at completely different days.
It's awesome, and two different accents too.
Exactly. So what I love to do at the very beginning, Melo, as you know, is just to get a wee bit of background, to try and figure out the journey and literal and figurative journey that you've been on that took you to the personal development space to the point where you were saying, I need to share this message. People need to know what this looks like. How did that manifest itself in your life and your career?
It wasn't really a clear path. It was a evolution of my work. So just over the years, my work's always been in service and helping people and supporting people in some way, shape or form. So everything from physical therapies to exercise physiology to I've had a shiatsu clinic at one stage where I was working with body work type things, working in psychiatric clinics. I've worked 20 years in psychiatric clinics where I definitely cut my teeth in there. I learned the good, the bad, the ugly in there. And just all my work just evolving. And I'm really fascinated by the mind-body connection and how the integration happens there with meditation and mindfulness, and also how it shows up in the body and trauma and all those things. So just constantly evolving, learning, shaping what I do. And then, as you mentioned, I cycled around the planet on my mountain bike, as you do. And I learned many of life's lessons there. So everything from resilience to rising above adversity to connection to believing in myself to trusting and all those sort of things that I learned along the way. And I thought, I've got a great message here and I've got some tools and techniques that I can help people. So in the work that I do now professionally, I'm a public speaker, keynote speaker, and just support as many people as possible. So in short, I'm on a mission to help as many people as possible to operate and function at their best without burning out.
Yeah. Do you know what an interesting thing I was thinking about, completely unrelated to today's conversation, but absolutely aligned with today's conversation? Where did that drive of service come from? Do you know, like, is it a trait in your family? Is it some sort of heritage? Did an event of some description happen? Did you fall into it? How did that come about? Because I'm questioning that for myself as well. So I'm interested to
Mm.
find out other people's journeys.
Yeah. I've never really thought about it, but I think culturally, like I have Italian background. Culturally, we're pretty warm background. We like to help people. Italians are always, giving away fruit when someone comes over, giving away their vegetables and all those sort of things. I think it's innate anyway. Like there's a natural cultural identity that's shaped with that. But I think just there's nothing that lights me up more than like helping somebody. So my measure of success, one of my success markers is when I put my head on the pillow at night and I go to bed, I ask myself, I do a gratitude practice, but I also ask myself, did I help someone today? Did I serve someone today? And most of the time it's yes, every single day. And it's like, that makes me feel good. So I think it's also a basic human need. Like some days when I'm actually struggling and having, some issues myself, for example, the first thing I do is reach out to somebody else to help them actually, and that actually lifts me up and lights me up even more. So it's an innate quality.
Yeah, do you know, I was just listening to a podcast last night that was chronicling Andre Agassi's autobiography, and I don't know if you're familiar with the autobiography, but essentially the first line in it says, "I hate tennis," and he's world renowned for being in tennis. He was
Yes.
he was essentially forced into tennis. It was quite an abusive upbringing he had with his dad and such, and he was. And it took me back to I read the book, and then so just hearing this summary was, and I think that's really why I asked the
Mm,
question of where did
mm,
it come from, because it's a fascinating area for me. And he has this, and I recall reading it in the book. He has this moment where someone is doing good for him, and then he does some good for this person, and then has this literal life altering experience when he sees the impact of what
mm.
was to him, some sort of inconsequential gesture, but a life changing moment for the family that he helped out. And then at that point, he has a shift. So some
Yes.
people in life are saying, I would love to be good at tennis. I would love to be a champion at tennis. I would love to be world number one. I'd love to win a Grand Slam or multiple Grand Slams. And he was essentially resisting that his whole life. And then he has this moment. And then he
Yes.
thinks, right, okay, wait a second. I can now use tennis was not the end game. Tennis was the vehicle to be able to help me to get to a spot that I could be of service and do right by other people, So it's such a fascinating concept. And I think you're right, in
Mm.
terms of a human need, the ability, the feeling, the understanding that you can and you do get to serve other people, make their lives in some way more pleasant, easier, happier, more joyful, whatever that looks like.
Yes.
It's an absolute gift. Not everyone takes it.
No, that's right. And when they do, though, it does have a ripple effect on the people around you, like them, as I said. So many of the work, much of the work that I do, I do a lot of seminars and workshops, and sometimes in the room there might be 50 people or 100 people. It might be a company. It might be even 1,000 people. And on that day, I might deliver just a little bit of gold or a little message or something really subtle, and you never know what people take away. You never know what
Yeah.
they walk out with. Sometimes even people are a bit like, not sure about this mindfulness stuff, but then they take it home and they do the practices, and sometimes 3 months later, 6 months later, 12 months later, I get an email from somebody who says, Melo, that session you did at XYZ company, it saved my life, or it helped me through a difficult period of my marriage, or it helped me through cancer, and all these little subtle messages that we're sharing in these sessions. It's having a ripple effect. They take it home, helps their family. Even some of the work that I do, I coach a lot of doctors, so I do a lot of work with surgeons and doctors and medical professionals. So essentially, I'm helping them so they can help more people. Yeah, and then that has this ripple effect that helps families and people. So it starts with one individual that you might be helping, but it has a ripple effect to their families, to the communities, to the
Yeah.
world, basically.
Yeah. I absolutely love that sentiment. And fortunately, that happens. Unfortunately, we don't get to really truly see the scientific evidence or the
Mm,
literal proof of that. But
mm,
as you mentioned earlier, in terms of your gratitude practice and putting your head on the pillow at night, you know, did I help someone today trusting that you did, even if you don't have that empirical evidence to
Yes.
say, I can prove, I can show you, I can even get a reference or some other evidence of such, but just that ability to know and understand that. And just to add to the point that you made there, I've had some classes and or speeches or talks or whatever it would be, where I have someone with all of the body language that you can imagine saying, I'm having a nightmare right now. This is not my jam. I don't enjoy this. I can't wait till this is over so I can get out of this room. And there's a scowl involved, and there's just general negativity coming. And then at the end, the person hangs around, and you're kind of like, I mean, it was bad enough being scowled at for an hour, and now you're going to tell me something else. And then they come up, and their demeanor has completely changed. Their energy has shifted, and they're saying, thank you so much for that.
Yes.
This has been so valuable. And I will comment to say, wow, I never expected that, because your demeanor at the time was completely different. And they said, that's just the way I learn, or that's just my face, or that's how I concentrate, or whatever. So there's also a secondary element of, even if you think that it's not working, if you have the ability to be able to look at people or see or observe them in and of the moment, it's still not true. You don't know enough about that. And I say that in unison, with someone in a very similar space to me, and also to anyone else who's listening or watching, to say, don't judge a book by its cover always. The people might just be having a different type of experience, and it's still just as positively impactful for them.
Yeah, exactly. And everybody learns differently, and everybody ingests information differently. I had a very similar experience in one of the psychiatric clinics that I was working in. I was doing a 4-week mindfulness course there, and for the inpatients in the room, maybe about 15 in the room, and there was one person exactly like that, like she was a nurse actually that was burnt out. So she was a burnt out nurse, and quite in a dark place, and she had that scowl, and she was like, she didn't really look at me, no eye contact. I thought exactly the same. But then as I finished the session and everybody said goodbye, she came up to me as we were walking down the corridors and said, Melo, that was the best session I've ever been to in the whole many years. So you never know what people are thinking. You never know what people are taking away. And sometimes they don't even know themselves until they ingest the information, and they do the practices that you might have shared. So very often I share what's called a 90-second breath break in many of the seminars that I do. So when they go home and do those practices, then they start feeling the benefits, and it might be months later or years later, or even there was one guy that I was helping him through a difficult period with a very aggressive throat cancer. And doctors gave him the worst case scenario prognosis. They gave him handouts about how much you're going to suffer, and it was horrible to hear what they were saying. Anyway, cut a long story short, I was with him for his 49 days of treatments for chemotherapy and radiotherapy, and we just met every day with whatever showed up. So I met him at 8 o'clock every morning, went to his house. Some days he was nauseous because he was off the chemotherapy. We did meditation, we did mindfulness, we did qigong. Sometimes we did some stretching, sometimes we did nothing. We just sat and supported each other. Anyway, a little while later, the oncologist actually rings me up and says, Melo, I don't know what you've done, but I've never seen anybody in my 45 years of oncology come out so good. Like, come out of this treatment so good. Wow. He ate all the way through. Like, they said, you're going to have, because it was a very aggressive throat cancer, you'll be having smoothies by week 2. Your hair's going to fall out, and all those doomsday messages. But he came out positively. He pretty much worked every single day all the way through, and the oncologist really acknowledged what had happened there. So I love those things where it sort of gets backed up with a bit of evidence. Positive mindset. So.
Yeah, definitely. No, incredible story. That's absolutely fabulous. So then, in terms of your travels across the globe, I'm interested initially in, is that what you thought you were going to do, or is that the way that it worked out? And then secondly, what did you learn about yourself, either in and of the moment or after the fact, that you because sometimes it's difficult to be objective in the moment, because you're in the moment and you're living and being and breathing and such like that. But what was the original inspiration, and how What changed for Melo?
Hmm. Yeah, there was probably a pre, during, and after learning. So, before I set out, and then when I did the journeys for about 2.5 years, and then obviously the lessons that resonate after that. So, at the time, I was just doing things that I wasn't really enjoying. I was in jobs that I wasn't really loving, and I knew there was more to life. I knew there's got to be more out there. And I was immersing myself in the spiritual practices. So I was practicing Shaolin Kung Fu and a lot of the Chinese medicine therapies and concepts and medicines, and I wanted to go explore the world and see it all firsthand. So pretty much most of my journey was either living with indigenous people of that area. So it might be in Africa with the Dogon people in Mali, or the Maasai in Kenya, and all the way through, like as much as I could, living with indigenous people, which got me very sick, of course, as you can imagine, basic hygiene along the way. Um, and then the other thing I was doing along the way was to stay in monasteries and temples and churches and immerse myself in the spiritual practices. So I was really interested in that spiritual side. But before I even left, there was actually 5 of us that planned this trip. So there was 5 of my buddies, and we were all mountain bikers, and we'd done some off-roading around Australia, and we'd done some day trips and hiking and tenting and bike camping. And we said, let's go cycle around the world, off-road. Let's go do this whole planet, and let's circumnavigate the world, go around that way. And it was really exciting, and we were starting to get our maps out, and the old Michelin maps there with Africa and India. And as we were getting the maps out and planning our route, every single one of them, one by one, dropped out on it. They said, it's just too dangerous. I don't want to cross the Congo, or I don't want to go through India. It's going to be dangerous. So at that point, this is before the trip even started, I was in a situation was, do I bail myself and not go, or do I actually just give it a shot and go for it? So that was already a lesson, like to believe in myself, to trust myself and go for it. And I'm so glad that I did it solo, because I could do what I wanted at my pace and just take my time and stay where I wanted. And then in preparation for me to go do this big cycling trip, I bought all my camping equipment. I got everything that I needed, because I needed to do it for a solo person. So I got a solo tent and carry everything myself. So I'd put myself out onto these different training runs and go out cycling in different weather conditions and different terrains and environments, through the outback of Australia, where it's, quite desert environment, or through the forests, or through the mountains or hills that we have here. And then on one particular training ride that I did, there was actually a storm forecast for the weekend. So I thought, I'm going to go test out my brand new equipment in this storm. I was so excited. It turned out to be one of the nastiest storms that ever hit that area. It turned out to be a cyclone, in fact. So I talk about this in my TED talk. So if anybody wants to watch my TEDx talk, you'll get the full version of this. But I was put in a situation where it was cyclonic winds, horizontal rain. I was becoming hypothermic. I got hit by a tree, and a tree damaged my cook set and my tent. So in short, I was in a situation where the external environment around me was chaos. It was dangerous. There was trees being felled. There was, really dangerous situation. So the only place that I could go was inside, internally, because the world around me was chaos. And then I remembered a breathing technique that my Tai Chi master had taught me, which I remember he said that it'll build up your core temperature. It'll warm you up from the inside. So I started doing this breathing technique, and I don't know exactly what happened that night, but I did meditate for 12 hours straight, from dusk till dawn. So pretty much from the time the sun went down to dawn. And meanwhile, the storm was going around, the trees were coming down around me, cyclonic winds, my fingers were turning blue, my lips were turning blue. And I just kept meditating and meditating and meditating and counting my breaths and doing that core breathing technique there. And there was a point where I feel totally safe, totally calm, totally grounded. Meanwhile, the world around me was chaos, but I felt totally safe inside myself. And 12 hours passed, and the first thing that I heard in the morning was the morning chirp of a bird. There's a bird in Australia called the magpie, and the magpie has this morning warble. It's very sort of iconic for Australia, and it recognised its morning is here. And I got up and I fixed up my bike and I went off on my journey. So before I even left on the trip, that taught me that no matter what happens, you've always got the resources inside of you. No matter
Yeah.
what happens in whatever I'm going to encounter, I know that I can meet that thing with full presence and have the mindfulness and have the awareness to actually cope with it. So it gave me the belief in myself. It gave me the trust to go do the trip on my own. And had I set out and thinking about all the crazy things that would have happened on the trip, including near-death experiences, I never would have done it. I never would have did it myself. I would have dropped out like the others. But that just gave me that inner strength and that inner confidence and that inner belief in myself.
So profound. And yeah, we'll definitely get the link to the TEDx talk on that. If you've seen a TEDx talk before, I'm fairly certain you haven't seen one like Melo's before, the way that it begins. And I don't want to spoil the surprise, but please watch it. And you'll see something different than you typically see in there. So then, talking about burnout, if we change gears for a second, that's one of the key parts where you're looking for people to have a meaningful experience and really express themselves in their life without the cost of burnout. Depending where you are, the burnout sometimes is a badge of honor for some people. It's some sort of gratification to say, I am willing to go over and above what it takes or what other people are doing to show how committed I am, to show how hard a worker I am, not realizing the destruction that is being caused in and of the moment. How do you I was going to say convince, how do you work with someone to have them realize what they're doing isn't actually what they think they're doing, and it's
Mm.
leading towards a series of events that isn't going to serve them or other people?
Mm. Yeah, great question, and something I come across quite often. One of the biggest challenges that I have, especially working with high performers, entrepreneurs, leaders, executives, surgeons, doctors, people that are really top of their game and working quite hard. Some of them are working crazy hours. The hardest challenge that I have is get them to give themselves permission to slow down or to pause or to stop. In fact, when I did write the book, Beating Burnout, Finding Balance, I interviewed around about 200 leaders, from different walks of life, from Olympic athletes to CEOs, executives, doctors, entrepreneurs, a whole range of them. And out of those 200, 90% of them didn't even realize they were burning out until it was too late. They didn't realize it was like at the end stage.
Yeah.
And the other 10% was divided into two camps, and one camp was more like you said, that badge of honor. I'll just keep going. I'll finish this, then I'll have a break. I'll get to the end of the year, then I'll have a break. But sometimes life has other plans for you. And the other ones knew something wasn't quite right, but they just didn't have the tools or techniques and mechanisms to slow down. They all have mechanisms to switch on, but not many people have mechanisms to switch off and to slow down. And that's the work that I do. And that's why I support many high performers to perform at their best without compromising their well-being. But I think it's also worthwhile maybe defining like what burnout really is, because some people ask, am I stressed or am I burnt out? So in 2019, the WHO, the World Health Organization, defined burnout is a syndrome conceptualized as chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. It's
Right.
not bad as a definition, but it's their 11th revision, by the way. They've changed it 11 times. And I think, we could probably remove the word workplace, because yes, workplace is a big part, but it could be financial stress, it could be family stress, it could be health stress. There's a whole range of this. But the three main criteria to diagnose what burnout is number one, that sheer exhaustion, just total fatigue where you've got nothing left in the tank. Not just the version of, I have a good night's sleep and I feel better the next day. When you are burnt out, it doesn't matter how much sleep you get, you won't wake up energized. So number one, that sheer fatigue. Number two is that feeling detached and a bit distant in your work, in your job, with the people around you, drifting off, daydreaming, and maybe a bit more cynical than negative, complaining more than usual. Everything's hard, everything's difficult, everything sucks, sort of thing. So that's number two. And then number three is that lack of professional efficacy. So things that are normally pretty easy for you, pretty straightforward, it's just hard. You just can't do it. Somebody gives you a little task to do. Oh my God, it's just too much. Everything's overwhelming. So that's the three main criteria there. And pretty much when you're at the point of burnout, you are now dysfunctional. You
Yeah.
can't operate at your best there. But unfortunately, going back to the question there, most people do wear busyness as a badge of honor. I'm busier than you. I worked across.
Yeah.
Yes. If you ask somebody here in Australia anyway, and probably globally, it's a response. How are you? How's things? I'm busy. I'm busy.
Yeah.
It's manic at the moment. It's crazy. All these sort of things. Yeah, that's usually the response. And when it's busy with a negative, then for me, it's a bit of an alarm bell. Maybe they're not coping. Oh, it's manic. It's crazy. Can't keep up. Too much. Too much. Too much. And the worst case that I've seen in the work that I do with a couple of my clients, and one in particular that comes to mind, is one fellow who wore busyness as a badge, running multiple companies, working across multiple time zones. So he was doing the UK, US, and Australian time zone. And he'd boast about his all-nighters. I was on the flight last night. I was working all night, and I got to my office in LA, and I worked at LA, and then I worked at the LAX airport, and then I got to my London office, and I worked all night, and then I worked in the Qantas lounge, and boasting that he didn't have any sleep, sometimes no sleep at all, just working all the way through, which
Yeah.
is great. He was a very successful entrepreneur and businessman, but eventually his body said, I
Yeah.
can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
And it shut down, like literally liver, pancreas, spleen, all of his bodily, all of his organs started shutting down. He got hospitalized in intensive care for weeks on end and in hospital for nearly a year altogether. So his
Oh,
body just totally shut down. So mentally, he was still quite strong. He could
yeah.
keep going. But physically, his body said, I just can't do this. Am I waking up? And am I going to sleep? Yes, he still has to rub on his body to this day. It's nearly 2 years later. Testosterone cream on his body because his endocrine system was shot, his nervous system was shot, his digestive function was shot. So, at what point don't you listen to the signs? At what point, do you just keep going and just ignore the signs?
That's that's incredible. I heard a thing in 2025. I was at uh, an ICF, an International Coaching Federation conference in San Diego, and one of the things speaking about, just the little nuggets that you get. I've got pages and pages and pages of notes, and the one thing that comes to mind, and it was almost a throwaway comment. Someone said was, "The body is smarter than the brain."
Mm.
So the brain will tell you, keep going, you're doing the right thing, this is going great, the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. And the body, if you're willing to pay attention, and that's one of the themes that we're talking about today, is
Exactly.
that the body is saying, excuse me, just give me a minute here. I'm trying to give you a sign, a signal.
Mm.
If you pay attention to this, and it's not with the fullness, not until you have the fullness of time, and you can think back and go, right, okay. So I just thought that was an aching back, or a
Yeah.
stiff neck, or some sort of tingling in my fingers, or something like that. But the body was saying you need to pay some sort of attention there, and the body is smarter than the brain.
Yes.
Like I had it completely the other way around, just purely through natural thought process. I hadn't really ever thought about how intelligent a system the body truly is.
Yeah, great word, intelligence. There's a body intelligence that we all ignore. Anything from tightness in the jaw, like I said, tingles or hunched shoulders or palpitations in the chest or nerves, sort of fingers or all those things. They're all signs.
Yeah,
They're all signs, or even just lack of sleep or irritability or anxiety, all those things. But very often we see the signs, we notice them, but we just keep charging on anyway.
yeah,
It's a bit like driving the car, and you're driving the car on a big road trip, and you're heading out for an 8-hour trip across the country, and the oil light pops up. Oh yeah, that's okay. I'll just keep going. Then the petrol gauge starts dropping. Oh, that's fine. I'll just keep going, and then eventually the car's going to burn out and stop. We just keep ignoring the signs, and we do have these subtle signs. Sometimes they're more obvious, and sometimes they're quite subtle. And
yeah,
that's what I'm fascinated about, the mind-body connection, and
yeah,
what does affect your physiology affects your psychology, and vice versa. So if we can
yeah.
change our physiology, through things like breathing techniques or slow breathing or activating the parasympathetic nervous system, we can then change our psychology, and vice versa.
Yeah. And it's one of these things, talking about attention and paying attention. One of the things I would be somewhat concerned about, is concerned the right word? It probably is that if you say you need to pay attention to the signs and signals, I've known a fair number of hypochondriacs in
Mm,
my life, where they're kind of like, there's just something, I can feel it in the back of my eyeball. And every time that she says something that starts to twitch a wee bit, and then all of a sudden you can end up being completely paralyzed by the analysis or the access to information. So in terms of the attention that you see people who are successful in this area of really having that balance between mind and body, how how do you see them doing that? How do you coach and work with them through that? Is there a
mm.
just enough attention, or is it the right type and style of attention? I assume there's not a one size fits all. How do you get that happy medium for people?
Yeah. Yeah. So the very first step to all of this is attention and self-awareness. So having that self-awareness first to realize, hey, I'm a bit tired now, what do I need to do? Or I'm a bit stressed now, what do I need to do? So that you can't change what you don't notice. I always
Yeah,
say that. It always pops up. So we need to notice that first. So the very first point is training your attention to have more self-awareness. And there's
yeah,
a couple of ways to train your attention we'll talk about in a moment. And then the second step from that is then do something about it to self-regulate. So self-awareness, number one, and then have the ability to self-regulate. What do I need to do? Some breathing techniques, or to go for a walk, or do something around that. And one of the things that always pops up, one statement that always comes up, I should actually create a slide for this because it's just like always pops up. One statement is, the best compliment you could ever give somebody is your full attention. Your
yes,
full attention, like absolute full attention. And that's including yourself.
yeah,
Like that's the best
yeah,
compliment you could give yourself is your full attention. But you know what I know in the work that I do, I've been doing this for decades, it actually takes training to train your attention to get stronger. It takes work because research says that 47% of the time, our mind is flicking off elsewhere. It's going off into default patterns, maybe catastrophizing about the future or ruminating or going into the past. So it actually takes training to train your attention. So that's the first lesson that I share with people. That first step of emotional intelligence is self-awareness. The
yeah,
first step as being a great leader is self-awareness. Many people think they're great leaders, but then when you ask somebody else, they say, "Oh no, he's unapproachable. You can't approach him if he's angry. He's manic. He's all over the place." So it starts with self-awareness, and then
yeah,
the ability to self-regulate. And how do I do this in the work that I do? Like I said, I'm a mindfulness coach and facilitator and mindset. And the work that I do, basically, there's two main ways to sort of train your attention. And number one is that formal practice of mindfulness that we all know about. It's like the stopping, pausing, whether you're closing your eyes and doing a 2-minute practice or a 5-minute practice or a body scan practice or whatever it is. So that actual physical full stop where you stop and you close your eyes and you connect with your body, you connect with your sensations of the body. So that's number one, the formal practice of mindfulness to train your attention. My minimum, almost like prescription for this in a way, is at least spend 10 minutes a day of doing this. At least
yeah,
10 minutes, just no phone, no podcast, no external stimulation, just stopping. And even if you're doing, like I said, I teach a 90-second breath break. Even if you're doing 4 or 5 lots of 90 seconds through the day, it's a
yeah,
great practice. The other practice to train your attention, which probably not a lot of people focus on, but I really do, is the non-formal practice or the informal practice of mindfulness, where you actually train your mind to be more present in the things that you are doing every single day. So think about it. Think about all those things that you do in default mode: commuting, driving,
yeah,
listening, walking, showering, all those things that we do, but we're there, but we're not there. We're thinking about the next place. We get to our destination, we don't even know how we got there. We didn't notice the things
exactly.
along the way. So all of these are opportunities to train yourself, to train your attention. And I really picked this up when I was cycling around the world on that trip. As I mentioned, I was staying in one particular monastery in Vietnam. And the practice there was to train your mindfulness, attention muscle to make it stronger. And it was one of those places where you could talk. It wasn't a totally silent retreat. It was like you could talk, but you could only talk about the thing that you were doing at the time. if you wanted to speak at all, right? So for example, if you were chopping the vegetables for the dinner that night, you could only talk about the vegetables. Oh wow, look at my carrot today, or my onion smells amazing, this morning. Or when you're eating your food, you could only talk about the aromas and the scents and the flavors and the experience of eating the food. And even when you're like washing the dishes, for example, you could only talk about the scent of the soap or the temperature of your hands if you wanted to talk at all.
Yeah.
But you couldn't be washing the dishes and talking about the weather or talking about something else or work. And it really made me realize, even though I had been doing the formal practice for already many years, it really made me realize that everything we do is a mindfulness practice. Everything we do is an opportunity to train your attention. Because if you can't be in the shower for 3 minutes or 5 minutes and just enjoying the experience of having a shower, how can you be focused for longer periods of time? If you can't just eat your meal without your computer or without a telephone in your hand, how can you have that focus for longer periods of time? So I do train my clients to do that. And the great thing about that is it doesn't take any extra time. It just takes more attention. And then they realize, wow, I didn't realize how not present I was through the day. I didn't
Yeah.
realize all these things are happening around me and my mind's not there. So it
Yeah.
trains the mind. And some people challenge me and they say, oh, Melo, so what? What's the big idea? What's the big deal if I eat in front of the computer or if I'm doing something else while I'm doing something else? And it's like, my response to that is, the way you do something is the way you do everything. So if you're eating while you're on the computer or doing something, you're actually training your mind to be distracted. You're training your mind to try to do two things at once. And as we know, we can't multitask. The human brain cannot multitask, not complex multitask anyway. So those two things, the formal practice, training the mind to be still, to be quiet, to observe the thoughts, to be with yourself and the sensations of your body. But equally important is the non-formal practice. Training yourself just to be present in everything that you do. Try it out as a challenge, everybody at home, everyone listening. Choose one thing today and say, I'm going to do that more mindfully for the next 7 days and see what shows up.
I know what mine is already, and if you don't mind, I'm going to share. As you
Please.
were talking, it was as if you were calling me out, and I do definitely need that, because I try and cram as much as I possibly can in to make sure that every single minute has every single bit of nourishment in there. And 90% of the time, it depends if people are sleeping or not, but I'll have a podcast on my phone while I'm in the shower. And then I'm half listening to the podcast and I'm full showering because I like to be clean, but then I come out and I kind of don't really remember what happened on the podcast. It's essentially noise. Certainly don't remember getting washed or anything like that. And it's like a transaction. It's just like this is a thing I had to do, and it's made a wee bit more bearable by some familiar sound in the background. But when you were talking about just the enjoyment of water hitting you, the ability to get you clean, like why is it important to be clean? Why is it important to be clean today? And those sorts of things. I don't do that. And even when I'm having a shower, when there's no sound and it's just the sound of the shower and the fan, I'm at a loss. And, I'm thinking, oh, I wish I could just put the podcast on right now. They really should do waterproof earbuds or AirPods or whatever it is, so that I could do that. And it's just this constancy of stimulation, probably, is what it is. And it's became this habit, as I say, where I don't remember either of the two things that I was doing.
No. I often make a joke around that, and it's a really good point. I often say, when you're in the shower, like, are you really in the shower? Like, the most mindful part of the shower is those first few seconds when you're getting the temperature right. You're making sure you don't burn yourself or it's too cold. But the moment you step in the shower, your mind goes into planning, problem solving, what I've got to do today, and it's not even in the shower. So, as opposed to saying, I love my lime and coconut shampoo this morning. It smells amazing. It actually takes training to do that. It really does. And a lot of people, as soon as they get space, and to your point there, like when you have a shower, you think, oh, I may as well maximize my time and listen to a podcast at the same time. Or when you're going for a walk, you listen to a podcast, there's no problem with that if that's your intention. So I think the thing is to be more intentional. If your intention is to go for a walk and to learn something and to listen to something, fine. But if your intention is to go for a walk and de-stress and process your day and just have a bit of time out, then don't listen to a podcast, because often we are filling up that space, that quiet space that we need to process information. One of the benefits of meditating through the day, one of the benefits of doing those 90-second breath breaks that I mentioned before, is when you do these little pauses, you process the last few hours that just happened.
Right.
Say, for example, you go to work and you stop at 10 o'clock, you do go for a walk or do a 90-second breath break, you process the last couple of hours. And then again, you do another one after lunch, for example, you'll process the next couple of hours. So then when you go to bed at night, you don't have to do this massive upload of the whole day, because chances are you go to bed at night and then you start thinking and you wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and your mind's busy. It's because you haven't given yourself those spaces through the day.
Yeah.
And you just got this heightened state of stimulation that's just like the next thing, the next thing, the next thing, the next thing, that just keeps compounding.
Exactly.
And then your level of stress is up in the higher sort of orange red zones, and then it takes a long time to come down. So all of these opportunities, having a shower, going for a walk, listening, even just sitting on a park bench and just watch the birds fly or the dogs run around or whatever it is with no stimulation, is a great practice.
Yeah. Do you know, I was on a car journey. I can't even remember where it was. And it wasn't even a long one, but I typically would drive all the time. And I think, I don't know, I maybe had a couple of beers and we were going somewhere or something like that. I can't remember, but I was in the passenger seat, very familiar drive route that I'm on. And then I just start to look and I'm kind of like, oh, look at that. I never noticed that before. Look at the colours there. And I said, and we come from a very pro-social teasing family. So any opportunity to just jump on someone for something they said is a thing. And I said, it's amazing what you see when you look. So everyone in the car starts wailing and laughing. And then it's amazing what you see when you look. It's amazing what you see when you look. But what I meant was literally what I said. I don't look at this because I'm paying attention to the road for the most part, and I'm driving and I just know where I'm going, and I'm certainly not on a sightseeing tour. But just to take that second or two to look out the window and look at the beauty that's out there, or the interesting things that might not be beautiful, that sort of thing was really, it was profound, and we still talk about it today, where the family still like to take the piss and say, "Oh, it's amazing what you see when you look," and I'm like, you folks are missing the point. Anyway.
Yeah. Sometimes we look, but we don't see.
Yes, exactly that.
We don't see what's there. So a great mindfulness practice that I also share is a very simple one where we tune into the senses. So our senses, our eyes, our ears, our sense of touch, are a great portal to the present moment. They're a great way to come back. That's why the body scan is quite powerful. So if you're feeling a bit stressed, you're feeling a bit overwhelmed, you're behind your computer, you've got 1,000 windows open, you don't know what you're thinking anymore, just stop, pause, and just ask yourself, there's a practice that you might have seen advertised. What's the 5 things I can see right now? So you look around and you spot 5 things and you name them. What's the 4 things I can feel? What's the touch, might be the clothes, whatever it is, the air temperature, and just go through all the senses. What do I smell right now? What do I feel right now? And that just brings you back to yourself. So going for a walk, I remember, training my daughters in a way, my children, like, what do you see right now? What can you hear? And that sort of trains you to enjoy the walk and to see all the things. And you'll notice the smallest little ladybug on the ground or an insect or something like that, and to train that awareness. There is so much that we miss. One of the questions I ask myself and other people is like, if you're not present with where you are in the moment, what happens to that moment? Is it like lost forever? Is it not etched in your memory? Like if you're always at the next place, if you're in the shower but you're already at work, if you're at work, you're already thinking about the next thing, where are you? Like, what happens to that moment? Is it not recorded in your memory? Is it not etched in your neurons? Chances are not. So train yourself to be more present, to enjoy the moment, even the smallest little things.
Yeah, I love that. I absolutely love that. So back to your book. You've wrote your book. You've got it out there. You're doing teachings and learnings in and around your book. Based on Melo today, what would you say is the most meaningful lesson that you've taken from the information that you've shared in your book?
Well, the book has some really pointed chapters, very strong chapters. That chapters on self-awareness. It has chapters on self-regulation, chapters on anxiety, how to deal with that. Chapters on uncertainty, on purpose. So every chapter has its own theme in a way. And my job with the book was to really simplify the complex, just to make it digestible, easy. And that doesn't come easy. That comes from 3 decades of this work, where I've worked in psychiatric clinics. I've worked in all different spaces with all different people. So my job in the book was to simplify the complex, and to typically the way the chapters are framed is it'll start off with a story from my travels, typically from the experience that I had with a machine gun in my ribs in Rwanda or whatever it was, what that lesson taught me. And then I'll teach the concept of that. But the biggest thing that people say to me about the book is it's so easy to read, it's so simple, and we can actually implement the practices. So at the end of each chapter, there's a little practice. And those little practices can be a 2-minute practice, a 5-minute practice, or an awareness practice. And yes, the book has won 5 global awards, which I'm very proud of. And I'm like, yeah, great, fantastic. And I get great feedback. I get emails around the world. But for me, it's like the subtle things that people take away. And like we were talking about before, you never know actually what people take away.
Yeah.
And I'll get emails, I'll get letters, months afterwards. And a good story that comes to mind that probably illustrate this and talk about this is I was presenting at a large workplace health and safety conference in Sydney. And I had the graveyard shift. I had the last session of the day. It was like 3:30 in the afternoon, and the whole exactly. The whole expo finished at like 4:30 or something like that. So I had the last session of the day, and I talked to about 200 people in the room, and I had one book left on me, by the way. So I'd been giving away a few books in the day, and I thought, no, you're not the person for my book. And they were very transactional, so I kept one book for the end of the day. And I did this talk, and typically at the end of the talk, people come up and chat with you, and they shake your hand and say, "Thanks, Melo, fantastic." But I did notice on this particular occasion that there was somebody lurking right in the back corner, like waiting for everybody to leave. And meanwhile, by the way, it was 3:30 in the afternoon. Like at 4:30 in the afternoon, I'd ordered my Uber to get me back to Melbourne, because I had a flight in the afternoon, and Sydney traffic is really bad. So I made sure I ordered my Uber for 4:30 to pick me up. So my Uber, I got my text in my pocket. My Uber had gone off, but I thought, this guy's waiting to talk to me. I'm going to give him some space. I'm going to give him some time. And he came up to me, very humbly. He was Latino origin, culture, and he said, "Melo, thank you so much. That talk was really good. Can I ask you some questions?" I said, "Yeah, sure." But meanwhile, my Uber was, buzzing me, and I thought, "Oh, no, this guy needs my..." Yeah, exactly. So I ignored the buzzing in my pocket, and he started to talk about his brother or his best friend. He's saying, "My best friend's struggling, and he can't integrate in society, and he misses his family back home." And he just kept going and going. I just kept saying, "Tell me more. What else?" And he kept opening up. And then suddenly he just broke down and cried, like absolutely tears. He gave me a big Latino hug. Latino, I'm Italian, so it's easy to hug, so that's easy. So he gave me this hug. My shirt was drenched from his tears, and he really collapsed on me. Meanwhile, while he was doing that, I was actually getting telephone. The telephone was ringing in my pocket, and I thought, "Oh my God, there goes my flight, there goes my Uber." But this guy needs me right now. He needs my space here. His name was Jose, and I said, "Jose, what can I do for you? I've got one book left on me. Do you want it?" He goes, "Oh, please, Melo, please, please, please." So I gave him the book and signed it off to him, take it away. He wrote to me 2 days later, and he said, "Melo, thank you so much for the book. Those little messages in there, I really understand them. I can read." And his English wasn't his first language, so like I said, I simplified the complex. And he said, "I didn't want to tell you on the day, but that person I was talking about was me. And that person I was talking about was me thinking about taking my own life." Wow. So he didn't realize, but I picked it up as he was talking, that he was talking about himself, but he was talking about his friend that wanted to take his own life. So, and then he wrote to me, he said, we keep in context. He says, "All those little concepts in the book, I do them every day. I read your book in 2 days. It's fantastic." So that little moment really taught me that holding space for someone is important, of course, giving them time, but also sometimes it's the small little things that they take away, little practice that they might do, and just yes, my book's won awards, fantastic. Yes, it's sold so many copies, but those little things that are in there that are helping those individuals, saving lives, that's what really resonates. So I can't tell you exactly what he picked up. I
Yeah.
couldn't say what the biggest lesson is, but everybody's different, and everyone will pick up some little golden nugget or something that they run with, and it helps them, saves even lives. So fantastic.
What an incredibly impactful story. Absolutely amazing.
Mm.
Unbelievable. So, I like to take this opportunity. As you know, this is called the Best You podcast. And what's one regular practice that Melo employs to give you the best opportunity to be the best version of yourself each and every day?
Well, the most obvious answer, I'll go with two on this. I think the most obvious answer is my daily meditation practice or my morning rituals. So I start the day quite early, get up, get outside, get that serotonin production. I have a big dog. His name's Coda. He's a Swiss Shepherd. So I take him out for a bit of a brisk morning walk. Immediately after that, I do a meditation practice. So that's about 20 minutes every morning. And I also close my day with a practice. And then I have a healthy breakfast. So 3 things before the day started. That's just for me. So one of the questions I ask myself and one of the challenges I have with my clients is like, ask yourself this question every single day. What have I done for me today? What have I done that's just for me? What have I done that fills up my cup? So that practice there, I've been doing for 30 plus years, and I have not missed a day of meditation for 30 plus years, hand on heart. So that's the big one that I'd say that's the non-negotiable.
Yeah.
But the other thing I'd say is what I say to my clients, because I have to walk the talk myself, is to give myself permission to pause through the day, give myself permission to stop. So I also inject in my day little micro meditations. And like I said, it could be 2 minutes, it could be 90 seconds, where I just stop, pause, do a 90-second breath break, down regulate the amygdala and the stress center, and come back to my center. So those little snack meditations, those little small meditations for me are equally important than the main practice that I do in the day. So those are non-negotiable, and they really set me up for success and help me to serve at my best.
Tremendous. Tremendous. Melo, where can people find out more about you?
Obviously, the book would be a good start. Yeah, Beating Burnout, Finding Balance. And my name, for those that are probably driving or listening, is Melo Calarco, MELOCALARCO.com is my website. So probably my website is a good point of call. I've got a free chapter on there if you're interested in. I can share that in the show notes if you like. Probably the best place. I'm also quite active. Out of all the social media profiles, probably my most active is LinkedIn. And so often sharing tips and tricks on LinkedIn. I'm also on a free app called Insight Timer. So you might have heard of Insight Timer, totally free. There's thousands of meditations on there. I've got about 5 or 6 on there that you might want to go to. So all of that you'll find on my website, melocalarco.com.
Brilliant. Melo, I've been looking forward to this interview for quite some time. It did not disappoint. It was absolutely brilliant. Thank you very, very much for taking the time to come on the show today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All the best.